What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Fantasy Stock Exchange here, and today I'll be going through my Week 16 running back rankings in the tier list format we've done these last few weeks, where you guys see the elite tier, the running back ones, running back twos, all of that good stuff on today's video. But we're going to be going through my top 24 rankings as a whole, where the tier cutoffs are, breaking down usage, tiers, spreads, betting trends, all of that good stuff to help you best set your lineups entering Week 16, semifinal week of fantasy football. You guys need to win this matchup. You guys need to ensure your spot in your fantasy football championships. So I will be doing my best to give you all the information possible to make those decisions. But before we get into the video, if you guys do enjoy content like this and are interested in watching more, make sure you leave a like down below. Comment your biggest start sit decision down below entering Saturday's games. And of course, subscribe to the channel on the road to 20,000 subscribers. I appreciate you guys for that continued support. But before we get into the video, as always, let's hit the damn intro. All right, before I make preface to the matchup chart and all the good stuff with the tiers, I do have to mention a giveaway we have over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel. If you guys go out on Underdog Fantasy, sign up and deposit using promo code FSC, 5 winners will be chosen for $50 in on-site credits. Plus, of course, if you do use our code, you'll get a 100% deposit match up to $100. This contest ends on Sunday, Christmas Day, December 25th. So you can win potentially $150 for free just by using our code, making your first time deposit on Underdog to enter the gauntlet, maybe the min, maybe turn that cash that you get, that free cash that you get on the site for credit into some big payouts down the line. So appreciate Underdog for that continued support over here at FSC. But now we get into the video, and let's start off with the matchup chart. As always, you guys can see ranking the matchups from the toughest at the top, the red at the top, to the green at the bottom being the most advantageous running back matchups. And starting off with some of the easier matchups, we got Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints going up against that Cleveland defense, that run defensive that has been affecting them all season. They are the easiest matchup to opposing running back. So if Alvin Kamara doesn't pay off this week, I am very, very concerned. Derrick Henry going up against that Houston Texans front that he has dominated in the past. You guys are going to hear a lot of good stuff about Derrick Henry in this video. And then finally, Devin Singletary going up against that Chicago Bears defense being the third easiest matchup on the entire slate. But on the flip side, we do see the Houston running backs. It does say Dameon Pierce there, but obviously with Dameon Pierce out for the year, we transition that to the Houston running backs. Your Dario Gobawale, your Rex Burkhead, your Royce Freeman. All of them are basically unstartable against that ferocious Tennessee Titans front seven. And other tough running back matchups to take note of would be Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson going up against the San Francisco 49ers, and Latavius Murray, if he does play, going up against that Los Angeles Rams front. But now we move on to the potential weather implications affecting this week's slate. And you guys can see it's kind of tiered based off, severe worries versus, lower worries, if you will. Yes, the weather concern is at hand for the Chicago Bears against the Buffalo Bills and the Cleveland Browns against the New Orleans Saints. And you can clearly see that with the over-under line set. A Bills game getting a 40.5 over-under against the Chicago Bears. Usually that'd be in the high 40s type of area. And then the Cleveland Browns versus the New Orleans Saints with one of the lowest lines I've seen, 32.5 in those games. So very, very worried about the potential fantasy output of the players involved in those two matchups. Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Las Vegas Raiders, Ravens versus Falcons, Titans versus Texans, Patriots versus Bengals, and then Chiefs versus Seahawks, all listed below. So make sure you make note of that. But now, before we get into the official rankings, I do have two names I want to mention in the will they play tier. Jeff Wilson Jr. of the Miami Dolphins, dealing with that hip injury. He is deemed questionable after 3 limited sessions this week. I do think he should play in this game after McDaniel said he was close last week, but it is definitely something to monitor when it comes to Jeff Wilson Jr. entering their Sunday game. Latavius Murray of the Denver Broncos kind of mentioned it in the matchup chart area, but he is listed as questionable after that DMP he logged on Thursday. However, he is expected to suit up this week with that foot injury, but keep in mind, this is a 33-year-old running back dealing with the lower body injury, that foot injury. I am a little bit worried about his potential efficiency in this game. But now we head on to the official rankings. I'm going to try to keep these pretty brief, but running back one of the week, no surprise if you've been following me for a while, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers, 6.5-point home favorites versus the Washington Commanders this week, 37.5 over-under, with the under being hit at a 56% rate by the Sharps. In the last 3 games since Elijah Mitchell got hurt, we've seen Christian McCaffrey become a pure bell cow running back for the Niners, one of the better situations in the entire NFL. 78 opportunities, about 26 opportunities per game, which includes 7 targets per game in that stretch, 4 touchdowns in that stretch, and 27.9 PPR points per game. He looks like that generational fantasy running back that he was built to be every time he's healthy. It's a tough matchup on surface. I get it. The Washington Commanders front is tough, but an elite talent like CMC with this elite workload makes him nearly matchup proof, in my opinion. If you have CMC, congrats on your championship appearance, because I don't see any way he busts from a fantasy football perspective. You guys see week 15 logged 89% of the snaps, 79% of the team rushing attempts, and 90% of the routes. True elite usage for Christian McCaffrey in that San Francisco offense. Running back 2 for me this week is going to be Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. Titans are 3-point home favorites versus Houston this week. 35.5 set over under, with the under being hit at an 85% rate. And it's pretty easy to see why I like Derrick Henry this week going up against the Houston Texans. In each of his last 4 games versus Houston, he's logged over 200 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns per game. This is the second easiest matchup on the matchup chart in a game where the King has dominated every single time he's played this team. I expect a ton of volume. He rules this team, and especially with Malik Willis under center, where we saw 49 rushing attempts in the 2 games Malik started earlier this year, including 4 rushing touchdowns. I think Derrick Henry is almost bust proof in this game. I think he's going to run dominant. He's going to get, 25, maybe even 30 carries in this game and potentially carry you towards a championship appearance. So Christian McCaffrey, locked and loaded stud this week. Derrick Henry, also a locked and loaded stud. Running back 3 for me in my rankings this week is Austin Eckler of the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers are 4.5-point road favorites in this game versus the Colts. 45.5 set over under, with the sharp money not really being available over on PFF quite yet. But when it comes to Austin Eckler, elite receiving volume this year, 115 targets, 14 touchdowns, and 22 PPR points per game in the 14 games he's played. He's an elite back due to this incredible receiving ceiling he's displayed all year on that Chargers high-functioning, high-octane offense. This is a solid matchup against an average Colts defense against fantasy running backs. And the elite receiving volume he receives for this peaking Chargers offense is a recipe for a week winning ceiling. Every week, top 5 running back for me, and one of the few with a 25-point plus PPR ceiling. Lock him in. Running back 3 in my rankings this week. Running back 4 and entering the elite tier given the matchup this week is Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. Giants are 4-point road underdogs versus the Vikings this week. 48 set over under, with the over being hit at a 90% rate. And it's pretty easy to see why I like Saquon Barkley. 23.64 opportunities per game for Barkley this year, 17.82 PPR points per game. This is the clear high ceiling spot in a game with a 48 over under against a Vikings D that has conceded 31.3 points per game since week 10. The Giants are pushing for a playoff spot. Saquon Barkley is their best offensive player and the pillar to their offensive success. I think he should get a ton of work in this game and potentially lead the Giants to an upset win versus the Vikings. Running back 5 for me this week is going to be Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Patriots are 3-point home underdogs versus the Bengals this week. 41.5 set over under, with the under being hit at a 99% rate. And Ramondre Stevenson, since week 3, any game he's played 50+% of the snaps, he's averaged 19.5 PPR points per game in that stretch, including 66 targets in those 11 games, which equates to about 6 targets per game and around 102 targets across a 17-game pace. He's a clear workhorse running back anytime he's healthy, and I do think anytime he's fully healthy, he's deserving of this top 5 status. This past week, he converted 22 touches into 168 yards from scrimmage against the Las Vegas Raiders, despite coming into this week battling an ankle injury that he suffered against the Arizona Cardinals. I have no concerns over his potential health entering this week. He is listed with that ankle, which I'm not concerned about because he got the volume last week, super efficient with it last week. I don't really see a case of him being affected by this ankle injury. And then finally, the last running back of this elite tier, Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders, 2.5-point road underdogs against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. 38.5 set over under, with the under being hit 98% of the time by the Sharps. 21.1 PPR points per game and 24.7 opportunities per game this year for Josh Jacobs. A clear workhorse running back, an elite running back any given week, given that massive workload he does get in that Raiders offense. Game environment is not ideal, I get it, but the Raiders offense fully functions through the success of Josh Jacobs. With the playoffs still in sight for this Raiders team, I expect the Raiders to rely upon their stud, Josh Jacobs, to potentially get the dub this week and potentially gear towards that last playoff spot in the AFC. Moving on to the running back 1 tier, we start off with Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings are 4-point home favorites versus the Giants. 48 set over being hit 90% of the time. About 20 opportunities per game on the season and 15.57 PPR points per game. However, it is a top 10 matchup for Dalvin Cook this week against the Giants at home, super high over under, expecting a ton of fantasy points to be scored either way between the likes, Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, all of the elite playmakers on the field on Saturday. Dalvin goes from an RB1, RB2 profile, on that 10 to 14 type of area for my rankings on a week to week basis, to a mid running back one and a must start option this week as my running back 7 overall. RBA is going to be Tony Pollard of my beloved Dallas Cowboys. You guys see the jerseys hanging in the background. 4.5 set favorites against the Philadelphia Eagles at home this week. 46.5 over under, with the under being hit 74% of the time. And Tony Pollard, he has been an elite running back since week 7, since Dak Prescott came back to the fold. 21.85 PPR points per game in that stretch. I get it, split backfield, but one that has yielded a ton of fantasy football running back value. You guys can see Hayden Winks actually did tweet this out, but the expected half PPR points per game based off usage of the Cowboys backfield actually leads the NFL with over 31 expected half PPR points between Tony Pollard, between Ezekiel Elliott. They love running the football. They're very good at it. This is an offense scoring about 35 points per game since Dak has come back. Not to mention with an implied total this week of 25.5 points at home. I have extreme comfort starting both of these Cowboys running backs. I'm prioritizing Pollard due to that explosive playmaking nature he showed, but I do think both Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, who I will get into, are strong plays this week. Running back 9 for me this week is going to be Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. 10-point road underdogs versus the Kansas City Chiefs this week. 49.5 set over under 89% of the time. 18.5 PPR points per game for Walker in games he's played 50+% of the snaps since week 6 when Rashad Penny got hurt. He did miss week 14 with an injury, but got fully back on track this past week in terms of usage as the Seattle pure bell cow running back. Chiefs represent a top 10 matchup for opposing running backs, which will help Walker get going, but I am a little bit concerned about the game script working against them, is my only negative. Of course, 10-point spread, very, very good opponent with the Kansas City Chiefs. My only concern is that they may be forced to pass given the fact that they are 10-point underdogs in this game. Running back 10 for me this week is going to be Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. 3-point road favorites this game against the New England Patriots when it comes to Cincinnati. 41.5 set over under 99% of the time. And he's super inefficient this year. I get it, but he is attached to a great offense with 21.3 opportunities per game for Joe Mixon, averaging about 17 PPR points per game on the season as a whole. He hasn't really been efficient. I get it. And he faces an extremely tough matchup, but the workload and offensive ceiling alone give him this low-end running back 1 baseline when it comes to Joe Mixon. Running back 11 for me this week is going to be James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. 7.5-point home underdogs against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. 40.5 set over under 79% of the time. And it's a pretty similar case to why I like James Conner, to why I like Joe Mixon. A lot of volume. He's been the focal point of his offense as a whole. But the problem that I have is that I don't trust the Cardinals' ability to move the ball this week with Trace McSorley under center. They only have 16.5 implied points this week. Vegas really doubts the Cardinals' ability to even put up much of a fight against that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, which limits the ceiling of James Conner. However, 19 plus opportunities in his last 5 games give him an extremely high floor, and as a result, he's going to make my running back 1 rankings this week. Running back 12 for me this week is going to be Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. 3.5-point road underdogs in this game versus Miami. 50 set over under, with the over being hit 94% of the time. He is dealing with a knee issue, but he is likely to play according to Matt LaFleur. You could argue with him being higher, but I am still a little bit worried about his potential workload limitation, battling that knee, battling that ankle issue that has been holding him back these last few weeks. However, given the fact that I think he plays and he should be fine, there's still some risk at hand here that Dillon gets continued involvement if Jones is banged up coming in. However, a 50.5 set over-under game against the Dolphins on Sunday for an ultra-efficient running back like Aaron Jones, when healthy, gives him an extremely high ceiling if he's at full health. If he's at full health, you can argue him being up to the running back 7 range in the rankings this week. But for now, given the little concern, I will have him as my final running back 1 at running back 12 overall. Running back 13 is Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. Again, as I mentioned, 4.5-point home favorites versus Philly this week. 46.5 set over under 74% of the time. I mentioned the pros of the situation when it comes to Pollard, and they all obviously apply for Ezekiel Elliott as well. Pollard's going to be the Cowboys space back, working in space, receiving work, explosive ability. But when it comes to Ezekiel Elliott, we know exactly what he represents. Goal line equity and touchdown upside that has resulted in 16.9 PPR points per game since he returned from injury, and a touchdown in each and every one of those games. The Cowboys, as I mentioned, 25.5 implied points this week versus Philadelphia, and have averaged around 35 points per game since week 7 when Dak Prescott returned from injury. The Eagles are a comparative run funnel defense, given the strength they have on the back end against opposing passing attacks. And I do think that the Cowboys are committed to the run as any team in the NFL. So this seems like a recipe for, Tony Pollard potentially getting 20 touches in this game, Ezekiel Elliott potentially getting, 15 to 17, and Ezekiel Elliott having a ton of touchdown opportunity against a weakened Eagles team this week. Next running back is going to be Jerick McKinnon of the Kansas City Chiefs, 10-point home favorites versus the Seattle Seahawks this week. 49.5 set over under 89% of the time for Jerick McKinnon. And he's been the hero of the last couple of weeks. He's become the fantasy football darling, given his elite receiving involvement he's received on the best passing offense in the entire NFL. The problem that I have, though, is that the pure opportunity split he has with Isaiah Pacheco limits his rushing upside. But as we mentioned, he's an extremely efficient player with elite pass game involvement, which gives him a huge ceiling. Not to mention the Chiefs are implied for 29 points this week. I think that Jerick McKinnon could be in store to build off his last few games. He's volatile due to the overall workload with the presence of Isaiah Pacheco there, but I do think that the ceiling is massive for Jerick McKinnon. Back 15 this week for me is going to be Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles, 4.5-point road underdogs versus the Cowboys this week, 46.5 set over under, with the under being hit 74% of the time. And he's been an elite rusher this year from an efficiency standpoint. 215 carries, which has resulted in over 1,100 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns. The problem that I have when it comes to Miles Sanders is the limited pass game involvement. 24 signal targets for 74 total receiving yards on the entire year, and a downgrade at quarterback, of course, going from Jalen Hurts, who's been ruled out, to Gardner Minshew in this game. However, the Eagles are still implied for 21 points despite the loss of Hurts, and the way to beat Dallas, as we know, with Jalen Hurts not being there, especially with their backup, is relying on that consistent run game. I think that Miles Sanders, even without Hurts, has a running back 2 projection and seems perfect in this mid running back 2 tier. Running back 16 for me would have been Travis Etienne, who put up 14.2 PPR points on Thursday Night Football. However, as we know, already played on Thursday night against the New York Jets. Running back 17 for me is going to be Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. 3-point home favorites versus the New Orleans Saints this week. 32 set over under, but the under being hit 94% of the time. And I get it, get in the comments right now, roast me. Oh, how was Nick Chubb out of the top 15? How was he out of the top 12? Well, for starters, a 32 set over under game and a projected snowstorm is not conducive for fantasy upside. Combining that with the fact that he gets next to nothing in the receiving game, you're tying all of your upside for Nick Chubb to him falling in the end zone in a game where the Browns are implied for 17.5 points. You probably don't have better options than Nick Chubb this week, so you'll start him and hope for that superstar ability to win over. But the poor game conditions are undeniable this week for Chubb. Running back 18, and the flip side of that matchup, we got Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. I mentioned it with Nick Chubb, but the Saints are 3-point road underdogs versus Cleveland this week. 32 over under, like I mentioned, under being hit 94% of the time. And this is the easiest matchup against opposing running backs, the worst fantasy football defense against opposing running backs. However, until Kamara and the Saints offense, who are implied for 14.5 points this week, show anything of life, Kamara's a workload dependent running back too. I want to rank him higher. I want to rank him as a top 8 guy, given what we've seen in the past, given the matchup at hand, but given the game conditions, given the low over under, given the implied points, and given just the play of Alvin Kamara this year, I can't rank him any higher than a mid to low end running back too. Next running back, and the running back 19 for me on the week, is going to be DeAndre Swift of the Detroit Lions. 2.5-point road favorites against the Carolina Panthers this week. 43.5 set over under being hit 95% of the time in this game. And with DeAndre Swift, he received 17 opportunities in his last game, including 9 targets from the running back position. He has a favorable matchup against the Panthers this week, like we saw on the matchup chart. However, the problem that I have with DeAndre Swift and why I can't rank him any more than a volatile running back 2 at this point is that Jamal Williams steals a lot of his rushing touchdown upside, the leading rushing touchdown scorer in the entire NFL this year. With DeAndre Swift, we're banking on that receiving work. We're banking on that explosive ability for DeAndre to pay off this week. So moving on from DeAndre Swift, and the final running back of my running back 2 tier, we have Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. 3.5-point home favorites versus Green Bay this week. 50 set over 94% of the time. And this is a tentative running back 20 in my rankings, but one that could get a rise if we see the official ruling on Jeff Wilson as being out. Could potentially enter that running back 10 to 15 type of area if Jeff Wilson misses this game. He's operated as a high volume lead back last week without Jeff Wilson in the lineup. Packers, 4th easiest matchup on the entire matchup chart. fit the over-under, a high-scoring game environment, and with the Dolphins implied for 26.5 points, I think there is extreme upside at hand here for Raheem Mostert. But again, the worry here about a potential committee with Jeff Wilson playing, of course, something that you will have more clarification on come Sunday. So stay tuned for that. If you do have Raheem Mostert, you're still playing him, but you're hoping that Jeff Wilson gets ruled out. And then finally closing it off, we're just going to go off with my final 4 running backs of my top 24 and the 4 running backs that make up the start of the high-end running back 3 area for me, in my opinion, in terms of their expectation. J.K. Dobbins, Baltimore Ravens are 6.5-point home favorites for Atlanta this week. 34.5 set over under, with PFF not currently having the sharp money bet on display quite yet. And when it comes to J.K. Dobbins, it's an easy matchup for opposing running backs this week against Atlanta. He should be extremely efficient, like we've seen. He's been one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL since he entered the league back in 2020. The problem, however, with Dobbins is that he only had 29 combined opportunities in his last 2 games. And with Tyler Huntley starting another game, this limits the upside of the offense as a whole. So running back 21, fair spot. He could blow up this week, given the level of talent, given the level of efficiency he's shown. But I'm very concerned about the volatility this offense could represent. Running back 22, Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2.5-point home favorites versus Las Vegas, 38.5 set over under 98% of the time. And the lack of receiving volume for Najee makes him a touchdown or bust running back 2/3. But in a game with a 38.5 set over under on an inconsistent offense like Pittsburgh, he's very, very tough to trust. You could argue he's, safer than the running backs above him given the carry volume he's seen. But the upside for an inefficient 2-down back really, really gives me pause still. Safe, projectable workload, high-end running back 3, if you will, but I'm not trusting him anymore in terms of my expectations. Running back 23 for me this week is David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears, 8-point home underdogs versus Buffalo this week. 40.5 set over under being hit 74% of the time. And 16 implied points for the Chicago Bears offense really spells trouble for David Montgomery. Combine that, of course, like I mentioned, this is one of the games with severe weather concerns. 20 to 40 mile per hour winds and a very good likelihood of a snowstorm. I really have trouble trusting this Bears offense to move the ball against this stingy Bills defense. However, the workload alone gives them that top 20 to 25 projection, but I'm not loving the ceiling outcome in this game for David Montgomery. And then finally, we do have Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs, 10-point home favorites versus Seattle this week. 49.5 set over under being hit 89% of the time. And it's a very similar bull case to that of Jerick McKinnon, but with less work overall and less receiving volume. He has received 16 plus opportunities in 4 straight games and operates as that Chiefs between the tackles back. So I do think he does have value here as a high-end running back 3, even if the workload doesn't really compare to some of the guys ahead of him. That standalone value for him, carry volume, combining that with the implied value if McKinnon were to get nicked up, I still like Isaiah Pacheco as a startable option in my lineups this week. But either way, I appreciate you guys for making it to the end of this video. Apologize for the shorter content this week. Busy week. But as a thank you for your guys' continued support, all week 16 rankings over here at FSC are free. So if you're interested in how the running backs 25 plus stack up this week, make sure you hit that link in the description of this video, linking you to our rankings this week. But either way, appreciate you guys for making it to the end. Hit that like button if you enjoyed. And of course, subscribe to the channel. Also, get in that giveaway. 5 people receiving $50 in underdog credit. So don't miss out on that great opportunity ending on Sunday, Christmas Day. But till then, take care, secure your spot in that championship, and good luck in your matchups.
Why you need the money?